Hi, I'm Dr. Kimberley Bell. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and I specialize in working with people who are suffering with dizziness, vertigo, imbalance, and unexplained repeated falls. One of the questions I hear a lot is, why do I have a new balance problem now that I've experienced some time in the hospital, or I've had surgery, or I just recovered from the flu? It seems like after people, especially older people, have a period of downtime where they're not as active, now all of a sudden they have a new onset of balance problems and they're just not sure why. So the answer that I've discovered is not just because the muscles are losing strength every day that we're not as active. Of course, that's part of the story. But the other thing is that we experience something called vestibular decompensation whenever we stop moving our heads. So current studies estimate that about 1 out of 3 people over 40, or about 35% of the American public, has an inner ear problem. Now these can result from inner ear infections as a child, or trauma, or maybe a genetic issue with the inner ear. But it's estimated about 1/3 of the American public has an inner ear problem. So in younger people, what happens is that the brain compensates for the inner ear damage to the point where a younger person may not even know they have an inner ear problem because their brain is doing such a good job compensating, and they have their vision and their feet that help them balance also. What happens with older people is that if they go through a period of time where they're not moving their head, then all the stimulation that causes the brain to compensate for a vestibular problem, it really goes away. The vestibular system somewhat becomes more dormant because of the lack of head motion, and it always is firing at a resting firing rate, but without the changes in the head position or the speeding up or slowing down of the head in space in relation to the pull of gravity, there's not as much for the brain to do. And so after an older adult has either been in the hospital, had surgery, maybe gotten the flu, or experienced an episode of depression. I commonly see this after people lose their spouse, when they've gone through an episode of grief and maybe they haven't gotten out of bed for a couple weeks, is that their brain decompensates so that a previously subclinical vestibular problem is now presenting as a brand new problem. Something that this person may have had their entire life, but they never knew about because they were so active, their brain was always keeping them in balance. But now that they've had a period of less activity, their vestibular system has decompensated, or essentially powered down. Through a lack of head motion, the brain essentially has powered down its compensation of this vestibular problem that the person probably never even knew that they had. And so this manifests in older adults as new onset of problems with balance and walking after a period of relative immobility. This is called vestibular decompensation, and it is pretty effectively treated with vestibular rehabilitation. So the recommendation I have would be to immediately seek out rehabilitation from a vestibular specialist, from a physical therapist and an occupational therapist who know how to not just strengthen your muscles of your arms, your legs, your trunk, and your core, but also how to retrain your inner ear so that your vestibular system compensates again for a pre-existing problem that you probably never even knew that you had. If you want to find a vestibular provider, look at the Vestibular Disorders Association website, vestibular.org, and find someone in your area. Thank you so much for tuning in to Frequently Asked Questions with Dr. Kimberley Bell. I look forward to hearing more of your questions and responding to them through my blog at betterbalanceinlife.com and through future videos on my YouTube channel,